So here we see the signal protein approaching the G protein coupled receptor. Once the signal protein binds to the G protein linked receptor, then the signal transduction pathway starts. So here the G protein is actually turning GDP into GTP, and then it goes over the alpha subunit goes over to the adenylocyclase, and then the adenylocyclase turns ATP into CAMP. And what the CAMP does is serves as a sort of relay molecule, which phosphorylates these kinases, these inactive kinases that you see coming into the screen right now. And what these inactive kinases do is they activate each other by dropping phosphates onto each other. So these kinases are all phosphorylating each other, and this causes all the kinases to become active. And then all these individual kinases go down to the endoplasmic reticulum, and then they cause the release of calcium ions, which is the end of the signal transduction pathway, and it is the response. So here we see the same thing. We see a signal protein about to attach to a tyrosine kinase receptor. The tyrosine kinase receptor then collapses to form a dimer. And then we see a ATP come into the screen here. And then the ATP drops off a phosphate. What this phosphate does is cause an affinity for kinases to come into the screen right here. And the kinases will then do the same job as before. They will cause the phosphorylation in the activation of other kinases, which will then cause a cellular response, and this is again the signal transduction pathway. All these activated kinases will then again form a phosphorylation cascade, which then goes to the endoplasmic reticulum and then again forms the response of the release of calcium ions. So the disease that we chose, or the drug that we chose, was heroin. And what normally happens here is that the pink molecules, which are called GABA, flow normally from the which is a neurotransmitter. It flows normally into the synapse, and it inhibits the release of dopamine, those blue molecules that you see over there. But when heroin is introduced into the equation, the release of those pink molecules, GABA, is inhibited, and it's inhibited because calcium ions cannot flow into that neuron cell, and thus it cannot create a signal for the GABA to be released. So the neurotransmitter isn't released because of the heroin. And what this causes is it causes the neuron, which houses the dopamine neurotransmitter, to become active because there's nothing else inhibiting it. And because there's nothing else inhibiting it, the dopamine goes into the dopamine receptor. And what the dopamine receptor is, it's a receptor, it's a G protein linked receptor, which is in a neuron that causes the inhibition of pain, so that you don't feel pain and you feel a nice sense of euphoria. And the only way to stop this is to stop taking drugs.